Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar sponsored and presented by ThermoSoft, entitled Understanding In-Floor Electric Heat per NWFA Guidelines. My name is Sharon Schaller, the Member Engagement Manager at NWFA, and I will serve as your moderator for today's webinar. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Sergey Schlippentak has over 10 years experience in the floor heating industry while working at ThermoSoft. And in that time, he has planned, supported, and provided assistance to countless successful floor heating installations. His responsibilities include overseeing the technical support team and acts as the primary contact for the wood flooring industry. Sergey is active on the NWFA Radiant Heating Task Force and on the UL Safety Technical Panel. His #1 priority on any floor heating project is to match the desired floor with the right heating system, installation method, control, and end user education to ensure the heated floor can be enjoyed for a lifetime. And we also have Ron Oliver. Ron has been in the flooring distribution and manufacturing world since 1983. He has specialized in hardwood flooring, laminate, vinyl plank, and bamboo for many of those years. He has trained and certified thousands of installers on behalf of hardwood flooring manufacturers, and his responsibilities include assisting the technical support team and acts as a contact for the wood flooring industry. Ron is active on the NWFA Radiant Heating Task Force and has sat on other NWFA advisory committees, as well as having been a featured roundtable speaker at the NWFA Expo. So without further delay, let's get started with this presentation. Take it away, Sergey and Ron.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. So this is going to be a crash course about the heating systems that are available now per the new NWFA guidelines that were just very recently released. We're going to go over a few things here, particularly why in-floor heat, and I'll go over all of the systems that the NWFA has acknowledged as appropriate or as compatible with wood floors. Systems in the order of the installation type is a little bit of a grouping of the systems to allow you to understand how the multiple different systems that are available get grouped together, as well as understanding some of the environmental factors that go together with using an in-floor heating system. We're also going to cover a few of the other things like the watt equivalent, the behavior of wood as a thermal mass, and the profit potential of adding these types of systems to your lineup. #1, if you're an installer, distributor, retailer, or contractor, the added revenue is a big one. You already have a project that you're working on, and one thing that the electric in-floor heating allows you to do is it allows you to add that and do this part of the project yourself, even after you're in there and have the subfloor already installed. This isn't something that needs to happen as a big pre-plan ahead of time, like a lot of competitor or different types of systems out there. With certain electric systems, it can be an afterthought. You can be going into a room that's being installed over a garage and say, hey, you know what, it's going to be a little cooler here. Why don't you add some heating here to stabilize everything and add that comfort? Another big one is customer demand. And how do we know that customer demand is a big one? Well, the NWFA guidelines, as all of you have seen, have changed from being about 100 pages long to the new version being close to 200 pages long. The radiant heat section changed from being 1.5 pages long to 20 pages long. It is the single fastest or biggest growing section in the guidelines that existed in the previous version. I'm not counting any of the sections that didn't exist before. And the last one is the big one for the customer. The reason the customers want this so much is because it drives their comfort and property upgrade for resales. It drives property values. It drives how the properties are remembered. A lot of times when you have a heated floor in a space, it doesn't matter the other finishings that you have. Once you've stepped on that warm floor, you want nothing else. You want warm floors in every single house you're going to have afterwards. Ron, anything to add on this slide before we move on to the next one?
No, other than thermal comfort, quoting our good friend Brett Miller, is a condition of mind that expresses satisfaction with the thermal environment. Okay, moving on to flexibility. We touched on that a little bit. You have the ability with in-floor heating to heat only the rooms that you're ideally using. If you've got a guest bedroom or other rooms that aren't frequently used, you can turn the in-floor heating way down. It's great for over basements, crawl spaces, and garages, simply because you can deal with a little bit of the loss of heat or intrusion of cold from the subfloor. And as Serge just touched on, in many cases, it's a simple retrofit versus hydronic. And some systems can be installed actually at the same time as the flooring is being installed. Any thoughts, Serge?
No, I think the biggest benefit that you have once you install these systems, just moving on, is the cost savings. When you compare electric heating systems to the other systems out there, biggest advantages that it has is the availability of renewable energy. You can generate electricity using solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and whichever one you do that allows you to take yourself off the grid, which gives you a heating element on a renewable energy that's renewed daily. It also, the warm floors give you a benefit of having the ability to reduce the overall building heat load that you need to address. And that overall can save you quite a bit of energy on your utilities if you're not using your own solar energy or so on. Basically, electric in-floor heating, if you need heat, makes dollars and cents. So how does a heating system warm a room? How does an in-floor heating system warm a room? Ron?
Yeah, we have a couple of diagrams here for you, but in-floor heating is the most comfortable and energy efficient method of heating an indoor environment. When we look at the diagram, forced air heat, and in some cases, baseboard heaters, those types of things, blow warm air around, and the heat is concentrated at the top of the room, and the cold air is concentrated at the lower side of the room, whereas with radiant heat, that is now reversed. So what's happening is you'll have warm feet and torso and a cooler forehead, which actually leads to a lot more comfort. So when you're making that decision, and the way that works is your body, is absorbing that heat from the floor itself, through your feet, and is picked up by your circulatory system. So you're actually much, much more comfortable in the process. Back to you, Serge.
I'm only going to leave with one little tidbit that I picked up while working with floor heating systems. Think of yourself going out skiing at some point in time. If you go skiing and you have a good set of boots, it really doesn't matter how warm your jacket is, you still feel warm. However, if you have the complete opposite of that, and you put yourself in a situation where you've got bad boots and a really warm jacket, you're still feeling cold. So the way that we translate that, people like warm toes and cool heads, not the other way around. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about using radiant heat. And when you're using the radiant heat, you have quite a few improvements in the overall comfort of the house. Ron, you want to go over the air movement?
Yeah, we have a couple of interesting photographs here, and one of them is actually a short video that will tie this all together for you. But what we're looking with radiant heat is that we're reducing air infiltration, exfiltration. The primary situation here is that warm moves to cold, and so what happens is with a forced air furnace, you're blowing that heat against the wall, and a lot of that energy is being transferred to the exterior because you're creating what's called a stack effect. So you're actually, by heating those walls, you're actually sucking in the colder air. So the forced air heating has to work a lot harder to get the job done. And then moving back to individual room operation, again, can be done in individual rooms. And, that leads to potential, savings, and watch how this works. As the floors warm, the walls remain cool. So what's happening is you're not creating that situation of exfiltration. You're putting the heat where it's the most usable, and you're avoiding the stack effect completely. Any other thoughts, Serge?
Nope. We're just going to get moving and talk about the new guidelines. So, as I mentioned earlier, the NWFA guidelines has changed and grown quite a bit. The biggest section that has changed is that radiant heat section, which has become very comprehensive, talking about what types of wood flooring are allowed over the top of the system, as well as the different systems that are acknowledged by the guidelines. Now, just because the guidelines acknowledge a particular system doesn't mean that that one particular system is the right one for your job. Diving into the systems, we're going to kind of blow through these systems pretty quickly. We're not going to go into too many details until we start combining the systems into grouping them. But the first system on the list here is that self-regulating heating cable. You guys might have been familiar with this type of a cable already in the past. The way that these cables are set up is it's a heating element that needs to be completely embedded in 4 to 8 inches of a concrete slab. You do need to make sure you consider the installation project that you have this going for, and follow very closely for which systems are allowed to be installed, whether it's embedded, direct contact, and so on. We'll get into more details on those in a bit. These systems are available in a variety of voltages. Talk to the manufacturer of the system or the distributor of the system to learn more about all of these. The one thing you'll hear as a constant as we go through these systems, talk to the representative or somebody who knows about the system in order to tell you whether the system you're using is the correct system for your application. Ron, do you want to go over this particular one?
Yes, heating cable and a holding mesh. Again, we're going to see a similar concept in the fact that this is being encapsulated in a cementitious product. It's a self-leveling product, and these systems are used pretty regularly and quite often, I think, by the tile industry as well. So again, it's just another method of putting the cable down, but it does need to be embedded, and the heating mat manufacturer will be able to tell you what the proper thickness is. And I would also, like Serge said, encourage you to talk to not only to the heating mat manufacturer, but also talk to in this case, the wood flooring manufacturer, to find out if that system is acceptable or adaptable to the wood flooring that you're using. Back to you, Serge.
Going on from the cable system on a mesh would be the loose cable system. Now, this is a similar type of cable. It's not exactly the same cable, but it is a similar type of cable that's still kept at an even spacing. The manufacturer of the heating system will specify what that even spacing should be for the desired power density, as you call it. And the way that this system is installed is it's held in place by either straps, ties, and you will notice that one thing that is missing here with a lot of loose cables is the membranes. We'll touch on those in a little bit about why there's no membranes here, but a loose cable that's positioned in some way, shape, or form on the floor. Now, there is an extension of this that has been used with wood floors quite a bit, and that is a sleeper type system with the heating cable installed in between those sleepers. Ron, do you want to touch on this a little bit?
Yeah, we included this as a conversation piece because it's not found in the NWFA guidelines. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that this type of system was used for many, many years to actually nail down into the sleepers. And sleepers at 12-inch on center are not close enough for you to be able to achieve a proper nailing schedule. And there's also the risk that if you're nailing into a sleeper, that sleeper might splinter or throw a piece of debris at that cable and basically erase the entire effort because the system won't work. So we brought it out simply because a lot of people ask this particular question, what about sleepers? And in this particular situation, it would probably be considered, depending on the cementitious filler, it would be considered for a floating floor or even a glue down floor. But Serge, you might want to touch a little bit about the wet weight of a 500 square foot room of both the cementitious filler and the water that's added. That is when the water is added properly.
This was the most common installation method that was done in the past with an electric type system. There are much better options that are recognized now, especially with systems that are allowed to be in direct contact. But this was the original type of system that was most commonly done with a wood floor. You run into a situation where in between these sleepers, even at the thinnest that you have about a 3/8 inch float, 550 square feet of cementitious float will weigh upwards of 3/4 of a ton dry weight, probably even more than that, depending on which lightweight you get. It could be less with a lighter weight, but it's still not less than 1,000 pounds worth of material that needs to be dragged into the room. It's a lot of work, labor, and things to consider given that the alternatives that are now available, especially after the release of the new guidelines. So one other system that this is system number 4 per the NWFA guidelines, and this is a heating cable that's embedded and positioned in a fabric mat. Now these are available either completely custom fit for a particular space or in pre-cut sizes, but the one thing that's common on these is that they must be embedded top and bottom with a cement layer. There is another system on going in later on that does not need a cement layer, so just because it looks like it doesn't make it that. Be very careful which one you choose, because that is a functionality that or installation instruction that is there for a reason. Now, moving on, low voltage metal heating screen, or no low voltage heating metal screen. Ron?
Yeah, these systems are very, very interesting and have been around for quite a while. They are low voltage systems. They're not on a line voltage power source per se. They're run through a transformer to lower the voltage. But what you see here is with the foldovers on the end, those areas are generally either, depending on the system, they might be colder or warmer than the surrounding mat. So what you see is in this layout is you do see some potential for cold and hot spots and variation in the temperature that the wood flooring manufacturer may or may not accept. We'll touch on this system a little bit more when we group the systems.
So one big thing for our biggest set of audience viewers, which are the inspectors, when you have these systems running or you have these system layouts, biggest thing that you want to have on hand is a thermal camera. Feel free to reach out to us. There's a variety out there of thermal cameras that you could use that are not that expensive, but they will definitely give you a clear vision into what's going on under the floor with a heating system itself. Some cases it'll show you warm, hot spots, improper spacing, proper spacing, as well as variations of temperatures across a wide spot as needed. Continuing in the low voltage systems is a polymer heating mat. These mats are also very common in the space. These do come in a low voltage only option, and certain ones of these, as depicted by the diagram from the NWFA, require a lightweight topping of concrete above them, typically due to the power output, in order to take some of that power, cut some of that power off from being in direct contact with the wood floor. The power output is one of the things that's discussed in the NWFA guideline, and it does very clearly say that it needs to be at about, what was that, Ron? 8 watts per square foot per hour max?
Max, and not to exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface of the wood floor.
So there are recommendations that the NWFA has put in place that you do want to make sure that the systems will abide by in order to preserve the integrity of the wood flooring itself over the long term. Going on to from these polymer type products, there is the nano polycarbon heating mat. This is available in both line and low voltage type systems. Some things to consider with these types of systems is if they're low voltage, they typically do need to be connected on site. And again, you do have the requirement for some cement toppings on top of them. When you do put a cement topping on top of the system, you have to be very careful and check whether you can nail through that system, as you can put a thin layer of a cement topping depending on what's required. But as you nail through it, you may hit the heating system itself. And that is a concern in a couple of fashions. Number one, if the heating system doesn't allow it to be nailed through, or the heating element doesn't allow that to be nailed through, you may damage the element. Another issue is if the heating element will transfer that particular heat through the fastener up to the floor covering itself and cause you to have some very clearly marked pinpoints on the floor. Ron, what is it in the wood that does that causes that?
Well, maples, a lot of exotics, woods that have high sugar contents, that heat transfer through the fastener. In practice, I've seen it create, little an eighth of an inch or a quarter inch long dots on the tongue side of the floor. And that's just a matter of an uneven heating application, that heat working its way up the fastener and caramelizing the sugars in the wood wear layer. Not a very happy consumer at that point.
As we're moving on, another very common system out there is a polymer type film. Typically the way that you see these is it's a clear film with a painted on polymer going in between two electric bus bars with a lead wire coming off of on the right and left side or vice versa. Very common system. One thing to consider is how these will behave as a vapor retarder. Because of the nature of the polymer film, depending what's out there, you may need to put a layer of poly below and above this system, or just below, or it may already have it built into the system. But when you have a vapor retarder, we'll touch base on that in a couple of slides. One thing that is a concern is where it's installed and how it's installed. So again, as the theme goes, reach out to the distributor, the manufacturer of the system, to ask those questions of where it's allowed, what's allowed, and how the standards are changing potentially out there as well for what's allowed with these types of systems. Now, this is a fabric heating underlayment or mat with a thermal cutoff. This is one of those fabric mats that we talked about a little bit earlier. If you take a look in the diagram, you don't have a layer of cementitious material on top of the system. As you see there in the pictures, there's glue, there's nailing. It's one of those systems out there that is allowed to be in direct contact with a wood floor covering from the underneath side of it, and may actually help you out with some installation steps. Obviously, the challenges, again, whether the flooring is approved over it and whether it's approved for the installation method, you do need to talk to the manufacturers to see where it's going with that. But there are varieties of systems out here that are acknowledged by the NWFA that are allowed to be installed, including as a floating method with a wood floor floated above this. Now, the last system, since there are 10 systems that were acknowledged, is this metal foil heating mat. It's a heating element that's running through this system. Ron?
Yeah, this is also a system that is considered to be, a class 1 vapor inhibitor as well. So there are some questions about where that can be installed. This particular product is designed to be in direct contact with the flooring and can be placed on top of the subfloor or in between the joists. So this does have some versatility, and it is available in multiple voltage variations. And we'll get into these a little bit more as we get into grouping the systems by their installation types.
So going into that is we're going to group them into basically 4 types of systems. And now you may see some overlap with some of these systems. But particularly, you need to pay attention which one works well with your installation method, and what are some of the challenges that you need to keep an eye out when you're installing these types of a system. When going into the systems that are supposed to be embedded in a layer of cementitious material, the challenges and the questions that you want to make sure to ask is what is the minimum thickness per the heating manufacturer of that cementitious material? But a follow-up question to that is check with the wood floor manufacturer of what is their minimum that they allow a heating element to be embedded. The two may not be the same. The heating element may say you need 3/8 above the heating element, but a wood floor manufacturer may say the heating element needs to be in an inch of a cement layer. So in that case, if you do it with a 3/8, you may not have that ability or that particular compliance with the installation instructions of the wood floor manufacturer should there be an issue in the future. Low voltage systems, they kind of vary, they go from and to both the embedded and non-embedded variations. Some things to consider with these systems are the thicknesses of the lead wires. You typically have to make the connections in the fields yourself sometimes, so that may add a little bit of labor there during the installation. And what is your power source? If you have a low voltage power source, these systems may be great to take the power directly from where your power source is being supplied, rather than having to use an inverter to bring it to a line voltage system. However, if you're using this type of a system and your power comes from the grid, which most typical construction is, you will need to have some sort of a transformer, and those limitations are typically one transformer per 150 square feet of system. Ron, cover some of the non-embedded systems.
Very good. What we're beginning to see here is some of the same cast of characters from other categories. Our good friend, the metal screen, shows up again. And so these are, all of these systems can be used as non-embedded systems. So what you're looking at is the first appearance of the number 9 mat with a thermal cutoff. But again, all of these are designed to be applied to a subfloor. In some cases, they are restricted to concrete and not suitable as a non-embedded system over a wood subfloor, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Serge?
So the next bunch of systems that we have are systems that are in direct contact with the wood floor. They're approved for direct contact with the wood floor. So depending on which system you have, again, you see some of our regular friends here. These systems are meant to be installed right above the subfloor or right above an insulating pad and in direct contact with the wood floor itself. Now, a lot of wood floor manufacturers have looked at some of these systems and they've already given the approvals and thumbs up of, yes, these systems are okay to be used with our floor covering. This also goes for some of the hybrid floors like a wood veneered LVT, which are becoming more and more prevalent now. Not all of these systems allow a nail down or a glue down installation. The one thing that I do want to address when talking about a nail down or a glue down installation is a question of how the system will behave with that adhesive. There are two types of concepts that we'd like to introduce to you guys on the call here. And that first one is glue to, and the second one is glue through. That is a big difference. When you picture a system that has a layer of glue, then a heating system and another layer of glue and the wood floor installed on top of that, if that glue doesn't completely penetrate the system, is the system sturdy, robust enough to actually hold up to that forces, the shearing forces that a wood floor that will ultimately happen with a seasons change to stand up to that. When you have a system that's designed as a glue-through system, you have a wet layer of glue, heating system, and another wet layer of glue working at the same time. And what that does is it creates one solid monolithic bond that encapsulates that heating system in between those layers. Check what manufacturers you have that have tested their adhesives not only to bond to the system, but to bond the entire assembly. because sometimes it's not the adhesive that fails, it's the assembly as a whole that fails. The adhesive's just fine. So in that case, it's a material choice that creates a problem. Ron, any other comments on these systems that have the direct contact? You're coming from the Hallmark side of things, from the manufacturer side. What are your thoughts on these systems?
Yeah, when, prior to my retirement and unretirement, I was looking at these systems pretty deeply, and it all comes down to versatility, and I'll probably leave it at that. There are some systems; these systems all have their uses and their application. What I would really advise is to look for the system that has the greatest versatility from its installation options, and that's where I would go with that.
So one thing that we do want to address with these types of systems is the Class 1 vapor retarder. And if you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see a membrane cable type system that's familiar out there. Per the NWFA guidelines, Class 1 vapor retarders are not recommended to be installed over wood substrates. Given that's the fact, any type of a system that doesn't allow air to move ultimately behaves, or vapor to move at all, ultimately behaves as a vapor retarder, as a Class 1 vapor retarder, and may not be appropriate over a wood substrate. So it'll work over a concrete type of floor, but if it's, but do you need that headache potential in the future over a wood subfloor and address those kind of spaces? So ultimately, Ron, we're going to have to blow through all these sections a little bit, but
Right.
we'll make sure to leave our contact info up to be able to clarify a little bit more on this.
Right. Well, we all know what the nature of wood is. It's hygroscopic. It changes its shape and size, with changes in moisture content. Probably enough said there.
So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the different seasons and HVAC.
Yeah, this is derived from several pages in the NWFA installation guidelines. And I think that it really addresses something that's a mystery to a number of people. Indoor relative humidity is affected by the seasons, and those seasons are heating season and cooling season. And the temperature and the moisture move from warmer to drier spaces, cooler, wetter spaces, also known as vapor drive. The moisture or vapor moves from the warm side of the building assembly to the cold side of the building assembly. And what that means is, in the summer, vapor drive is from the outside in. So the indoor space is nice and cool and lower temperature. And what that does is the heat and humidity wants to move through the wall assembly and affect the interior of the home. In many cases, the HVAC or air conditioner can deal with that humidity drive while it's cooling the air down. But conversely, in the winter, the vapor drive is from the inside out. And what's happening is we have the reverse. We have humidity being sucked out of the structure. And without that humidity being replaced, there can be some, unpleasant consequences, which we'll get into in the coming slides.
So one big thing that changes when you're using a radiant type heat source, whether it be electric or hydronic, the flooring warming effect of the space means that the forced air is being run a lot less. If your primary source of heat or sole source of heat, and the two are very different, is electric radiant or just a radiant heating system in general, you will need to provide supplemental humidification in that space. However, if you do have your primary source of heat being the forced air, what you can do is have a total control system that will allow you to humidify everything as needed. The big thing that you do need to notice with floor heating systems that are put in is that initial planning, at least that's done by the architect, is done to be a forced air type is the primary, and then the radiant is the supplementary system. What we find in practice, though, is that a lot of times that gets flipped. And Because of that, there is not enough humidity or humidification in the space. When you've got the two systems working together, because your feet are feeling warmer, you can a lot of times turn down and make the overall temperature in the house be cooler while still feeling just as warm. And when you do that, you don't humidify the space nearly enough with a typical bypass type humidifier. One thing that we strongly recommend that when you have a combination of a heating system in a good part of the space combined together with a forced air system is that you change yourself over from a bypass type humidifier to an actual steam type humidifier, which will allow you to just circulate the air using the fan on the forced air system and humidify the space without having to run the heat. Ron, any comments?
Yeah, I think the thing that's very, very important is we're talking about, humidity control. This applies to a house with radiant heat or not. Many, many times the radiant heat is the suspect when in fact the air is just too dry. In going to the cooling months, an HVAC can also benefit from the use of dehumidifiers, crawl spaces, unfinished basements, and believe it or not, attics can benefit from a dehumidification system as well. And I see we're moving on here. Wood is actually an effective thermal mass, and as that mass is heated, the cooler air above is going to draw the heat from which is now the thermal mass, the wood flooring. And in the diagram below, we're showing the importance of a little bit of periodic air circulation to address any low humidity issues and get that humidity to impact with the wood floor as well.
The one big thing to address on these types of conversations or these types of systems is the strong recommendation by the NWFA guidelines to have some sort of a data logger installed in your floor. Now that data logger, one that there's several out there. We'll talk about one which we strongly recommend in the future in a couple of slides ahead when we get into the Q&A section. But the big thing is make your floor a smart floor. You have a smartphone, you have a smart thermostat, you have a smart TV. Why not have a smart floor and let that floor tell you if your humidification is appropriate well before you start seeing an issue? There's a few of them out there, like I said. Most of them don't quite work as well as ones that are embedded in the floor covering itself, but the ones that are embedded in the floor covering and connect to your phone will let you know exactly what that wood floor is doing, as well as the other wood appliances in your space. Now, how does this system and how does the entire system combine together, and what's something to think about? Well, electric systems, unlike forced air systems, are rated in watts versus BTUs. And because an electric system is rated in watts, I have a little bit of a calculation that kind of flows you through what it does. 1 watt equals 3.4 BTU. At 1,000 square feet of a system that's properly rated, you can get roughly 34,000 BTU in that 1,000 square feet of heated floor. Now, how that relates to an equivalent forced air system, a forced air system, to be equivalent for heating the space of this, generally would need to have double the BTU output. So you need a system that's 68,000 BTU to equal the comfort levels of what a 34,000 BTU radiant heating system will do. The only challenge that the radiant heating system will have is recovery. So if you leave the space unconditioned and you let it cool down, the radiant system, because of the lack of that massive overpowering of that space, will take a very long time, if it can even catch up to heating that space as a whole, which is why the systems are typically installed together to give you a radiant system to behave as a source of heat, plus a forced air system to allow you the quick recovery. And sometimes when you have only one type of system put together, what that you end up having is a system that will cook your floor off when it has to overpower that type of a system. Now, Ron, want to go into a little bit about the profit potential?
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about some of the systems that are shown is that they can lend themselves to being installed essentially at the same time as the hardwood floor. So as a retailer or an installer, a job is planned, you're going to be there, and those systems can be placed at the same time the floor is being installed, or maybe the very day before. So those systems tend to be the direct contact systems and non-embedded systems. So one of the things that you're going to look at is in those groups of systems, what's the most versatile? And we also recommend that you establish a relationship with a licensed electrician so he can make sure as you're planning this job that you have the proper output and capacity for the project. And second of all, for him to come and connect the system after it's been applied. So that's very, very important. But in this time when retailers are being squeezed ever so much tighter, to be more specialized and have other options to offer that floor covering customer, we see that as a great growth of your profit and your bottom line.
Another thing that you want to make sure that you address is where and which of your wood flooring manufacturers actually approve these types of systems. Some of these systems have been tested by wood flooring manufacturers now for a number of years, and they're actually written into their installation manuals, their guidelines, as well as a lot of accessories like adhesives that are completely covered by this. Having a system that allows you to have everything covered from start to finish in the installation gives you peace of mind and gives you a clear, trackable path of what instructions need to be followed to install a successful installation, as well as trying not to shoehorn a system in place which doesn't necessarily fit. That pretty much wraps up our presentation here, and we're now at the Q&A stage. Sharon, do we have any questions hovering out there?
Oh, we do, but thank you, Sergi. Thank you, Ron. That was a very informative presentation. We have a couple questions from Scott. Does your website allow us to look into your systems further?
Yes, we do have several different options out there. You can go to warmstep.com to see specifically about the WarmStep system. One big thing that we do as a WarmStep as a system, as a whole system, this is the system that's recommended for the wood floors by us. It's one that we manufacture. And what makes this system a little bit different than any of the other systems out there, this one is the number 9 as acknowledged by the NWFA. And it's a system that's allowed to be in direct contact with a wood floor if it's a floating floor. It's a system that's been tested by a number of adhesive manufacturers, including Sika, Drytex, Stuff, Mapei, in order to make sure that it adheres through, not to, but through. And feel free to reach out to us because we've got some videos for you by some of the adhesive manufacturers ripping up the cement board from underneath with a, what was it, solid over the top of this, Ron?
Yes, it was. The concrete failed before the system did.
And the adhesive, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And the big part of it is that we do call for the use of a fit box with our system as part of the whole system, because it will actually let you know exactly what's going on with the floor and give you a sanity check to make sure that the temperatures match what is set on the thermostat.
Okay, Scott's second question is, will you consider selling to wood flooring professionals to provide another profit center?
This system is actually designed to be sold by the wood flooring professional, not just and priced as such, as a matter of fact. It's meant to be sold through distribution and retail by the wood flooring professional. We do have the ability to get you connected with a local distributor in your area that can sell and provide you with this system. But we will be more than happy to provide any support from the manufacturer directly to teach you or answer any questions for you exactly what you need to do to make sure you have a successful installation.
Okay, the next one is from Brian, more of a comment. He says, I believe radiant heat is the new normal, and I personally am an advocate in many situations. But as a contractor and an inspector, I dread radiant heat jobs or site inspections. It is nearly impossible to know if the radiant heat has been operating correctly prior to, during, and after the wood floor is installed. I'll look into thermal cameras for inspections.
Brian, definitely reach out to us or leave your information in the chat and we'll reach out to you in regards to this. You can send a chat to me. The FID box is a big one. This is part of why, as a total complete system, we have the FID box as part of the standard recommendation for it. Number one, the new NWFA guidelines, they do have some recommendations that still can be overwritten by the manufacturer of the flooring companies themselves of the ramp up, ramp down functionality. As our heating system, as warm step, we have a couple of limitations that are built in to this system to ensure a safe system installed for every type of wood flooring. Those include a, number one, hard limit up top of about 10 to 15 degrees above ambient temperature because of the tailored power out that's specifically designed for wood floors. So even if the end user is improperly controlling the system, you're not getting that much of a temperature climb above the system of what it's normally allowed. Plus, the thermostat allows you to program a slow ramp up, ramp down time frame, whether you're locally or remotely if you do a Wi-Fi thermostat. And finally, you've got the FID box or the data logger that's installed with it that keeps track of exactly what the conditions were when it was installed and what they are through the entire time that it's used. And that is the biggest part of addressing that concern that you have of has it been used properly?
Another question from Scott. He asks, have you tested your products with our industry adhesives? If so, what type of results did you collect?
Well, the system has been tested by, as I mentioned earlier, a number of adhesive manufacturers. I'll use the example of the one that, and we've got the video that I'll be more than happy. Let me know, just shoot, like I said, in the chat, shoot your email over. And what I'll be more than happy to do is send you a video of Sika doing a test with their T100 on with the engineered flooring failed when adhered with this. When you're talking with the solid, the concrete floor below got ripped off with a layer of adhesive and heating system. The concrete floor failed. We've got approvals and letters of suitability from DryTech, Sika, as well as Mapei,
Franklin International, Bostic.
Tight Bond, Bostic. I can keep going.
Okay. Brian asks, were you saying that radiant heat often needs forced air systems to allow for ambient conditions to act properly in the environment?
Typically when you have a system installed, you have some sort of a forced air added to the space, whether it be with a mini split or it's a forced air conditioner, so it's a central air conditioner system in the house. You don't need to have forced air, but you need to account for that humidity to be added to the space or dehumidified as needed. Forced air is just a common thing that's put in there, and because electric very often is considered as an afterthought, the forced air is already in the place, installed in the structure. And it's easier to get everything to work together than trying to keep everything separately. And then there's quite a few different systems out there. I know the T9 thermostats from Honeywell or Residio, however they call them now, Residio. They allow you to actually use an IAQ type system or indoor air quality, where they'll humidify the space without actually having to run the heater if the humidifier is capable of doing that. And same goes of being able to turn on the blower and dehumidify the space without having to run the dehumidifier separately.
Okay. Arcadius asked, the FidBox have batteries live a maximum of 6 years. What happens after if you embedded it into the flooring?
So the FidBox itself, what we've seen is, number one, you need to know where that FidBox is installed, and you record that during the installation. In our experience, is the first 2-3 seasons in a space with the FidBox being used already tells you everything you need to know on how the system will perform, and it teaches the homeowner on what it needs to do throughout the seasons. Anytime that the FidBox is done, the battery life is done on the FidBox, most of the time the homeowner doesn't even need to do anything else, because you've already collected the information to let you know that it's either been used properly or things have been adjusted, or you see that the FidBox keeps telling you that you've got problems, and the space never gets adjusted appropriately within a timely manner. If you have a pattern of where the FidBox lets you know something and then it gets adjusted correctly, that type of a homeowner will actually do a board replacement after the batteries die in the FidBox and get a new FidBox in place. The homeowner that learns how to use it typically never has any problems going forward. However, that homeowner that never uses the FidBox in the first place, at least you have a log of what and how the system behaved and how it was used before the issues went bad. And that's a full 6 season cycles that you have there to show a pattern.
Okay, Leslie has a couple questions, and I think we'll end there because it's right at the hour here. So Leslie asks, my client is nervous about heating wood. Are there any wood manufacturers that have cleared use with your product?
Ron, you want to field that one?
Yeah, we've actually been in close conversation with a lot of hardwood flooring manufacturers for a couple of years now already. Hallmark being one of them. Hallmark has accepted the use of our warm step heating mat system under their engineered solid and engineered SPC vinyl products, as well as other vinyl products. Mannington has endorsed it. There's a long list of other manufacturers. Owens.
Provenzo's looking at it right now. Allegheny Mountain, Smart Plank. There's quite a few manufacturers that have already evaluated these systems and approved it. Oh, Johnson Hardwoods, that's another big one out there as well.
So yeah, there's plenty of options now.
Okay, her second question, is there some universal heating system that works with different installation methods like floating, glue down, and nail down?
You're looking at it. Good question. The one system that, what happened with WarmStep, the way that WarmStep came about to be, is WarmStep is an evolution of a system that's been used for 17 plus years in very good success that we've been selling the heating systems now. WarmStep came out due to the things that we learned in our participation on the NWFA task force. And because of the flexibility of being a U.S. manufacturer that can work with the groups like the NWFA, what we did was take the input and take the courses, the trainings, everything that the wood floor industry had to offer, and we modified WarmStep modified one of our other products to be what WarmStep is now. And that is a system that is uniquely tailored for the wood floor industry. It is very conveniently also beneficial for any retail distribution type that wants to carry a system that's universal, because those benefits that benefit the wood floor space also happen to benefit the other floor coverings very easily across the board.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sergi and Ron. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar sponsored by ThermoSoft. And if you have any more questions, please contact Sergi and Ron with, you want to put that screen up there, Sergi?
Absolutely.
There is their information. You can contact them directly with any questions.